Mermelstein is a literacy thought leader, published author, and passionate writing, reading, and language development authority. For the past 30 years, she has provided professional development for teachers nationally and internationally, translating literacy research and data into successful and impactful classroom application. Leah helps teachers connect the learning dots so students realize and reach their full potential. Leah holds a master's in cultural diversity and curriculum reform and a bachelor's of science in education from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. She's a graduate of the Science of Reading Academy and is trained in Sounds Right. She also earned a supervisory license from Rowan University. She has authored 5 instructional literacy books focused on deconstructing the reading and writing process and how to leverage reading to support writing and writing to support reading. Leah lives in Hoboken, New Jersey with her daughter. And Leah, you've been on our show with Dr. Kelly Cartwright, season 2, episode 11, talking about the active view of reading. And we're super excited to have you today on our season 3.
Oh, any day talking with you, Cheryl, is a good one. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. You are such a smart cookie, and I'm super excited to share this amazing topic with you. What are you seeing in classrooms today?
It's a great question. So first, I just want to say, as somebody who's working with teachers day in, day out, they are doing a fantastic job in the midst of this, I think, exciting but very intense national conversation on literacy. And for the purposes of our conversation, I'm going to talk about the phonics part of this. They have been working really hard, the teachers I'm working with, to build their knowledge of phonics. And the good news is we are seeing the results of that knowledge in their classrooms. Teachers are seeing the data around phonics in decoding is really astonishing. And because they're becoming automatic, the teachers are seeing an impact on the data in both their fluency and comprehension. So it's not just the phonics. And so they are just so pleased. But what's fascinating is they're not seeing the same upticks in writing. So they're teaching that phonics, but what the teachers are saying to me is they're not seeing the transfer of that phonics knowledge into their writing. They're not seeing the same improvement in data. And so we've been trying to dig in this year to think about that encoding part, to think about how do we make sure that we're seeing the same upticks in encoding as we are in decoding.
Can you tell us what encoding is?
Yes. I'm going to start with decoding just to show the relationship between decoding and encoding. So decoding is the ability to lift the words off the page. So when a child reads, they will look at the letter, they'll recognize it, they'll say the sound. And as I learned in Sounds Right, their mantra is say the sounds and read the word. And so when I'm decoding, I am saying the sounds and reading the words. As kids get older and more proficient, they're not just saying the sounds and reading the words to decode. They're also using word parts. They're also using the history of words. But the goal in decoding is to become automatic. Because when they're automatic, their cognitive load is less. Because when they're automatic, and we're going to talk more about cognitive load soon, they're able to focus on fluency and comprehension. I always think about automaticity when I think about getting my morning coffee. I can barely remember getting it because it's completely automatic. I do it without thinking. And so that's our goal in decoding. Encoding is the ability to be able to put the words on the page. So when I'm writing something, I need to be able to say the sounds. I need to be able to retrieve that and put it on the page, not just recognize it, but retrieve it, put it onto the page. First, I do it accurately, and then I need to be able to do that automatically, because when I do it automatically, I'm then able to have some cognitive load lifted so I can focus on writing beautiful, amazing texts. The goal in both decoding and encoding is for it to be automatic.
I really love this idea of encoding. You know, I was talking to Dr. Una Malcolm recently, and she talked about encoding in a very interesting way. She gave this analogy. She said decoding is like seeing someone that you know and recognizing their face, you know? But trying to recall someone's name and maybe even where you met them is a little bit more difficult.
Yes.
That's like more like
Yes.
encoding, which I
Yes.
think is something really interesting to think about. Like they're the inverse of one another, but yet there are different skills that are required.
Absolutely. There's a lot of similarities, but they're not the same.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So why do you think they're not seeing the progress in
Oh,
encoding?
great question. I think that there are three connected reasons. So the first reason is, I mean, even the name, the national conversation is about the science of reading.
That's
Even
right.
the name of the conversation that is much more about reading than it is writing. So when I talk to teachers, um, they're given lots more professional development on reading. A lot of times I'm tasked with helping with reading. And so because the conversation, there's more hours in the day put to reading. And I think because of that, it's writing almost is taking a back seat. I'm trying as hard as I can in my own work now not to have it take a back seat, but I think probably in most schools, writing is taking a back seat. And then the other thing I think connects to what you said is that becoming an automatic encoder is harder than becoming an automatic decoder. There's more skills. If we think about it, just to illustrate some of them, you have to know the other sounds. You have to be able to segment. You have to be able to write it, handwriting. So letter formation, where do you start? Uppercase letter, lowercase letters, punctuation, proper grip, posture, paper position. It's just a harder concept.
It is.
There's more to it.
Oh yeah, and you know what? It's very interesting that what you say about that. Like that's our sweet spot of learning without tears. Like we've been, we started as a handwriting company, which, as you
Mm-hmm.
know, is literacy, and so we understand the nuances that it takes to actually be able to handwrite. And now we take those wonderful practices and apply them when it comes to encoding. So we don't separate them, which is
Yeah.
great. We understand that they are two sides to a coin, and you need to spend time, dedicated time, doing both of those.
Mm-hmm.
So sure. Do you have an example of like when a student may have been able to apply these encoding skills, Leah?
I have an example of you mean an example of a kid who's applying it during writing time?
Yes, from going from reading to writing.
Oh, so I think one of the things that I think about with that is I think that because it's harder, I don't tend to look for, I'm teaching the sound A on Monday, the 4 different sounds of A on Monday, and then I'm disappointed I can't see it in their writing on Tuesday. That
Yeah.
because it's harder, very often what in some of the schools I'm working in, the the kind of work they're looking for in their independent writing is the work they've been working on the month before. So we'll be looking at that. And when we've done that and thought to ourselves, okay, we're working on, the different sounds of A in January, we have lots of kind of explicit, precise practice on that as a whole class. And then in February, we're analyzing their writing through, do we see that in their writing? And because we're doing it that way, we're starting to see that transfer.
Huh. So do you think then that it's because it takes more time?
Yes. Yes, and we have,
Huh.
I'm gonna give you an example of a time just yesterday when a student hadn't made that transfer. I had to remind myself. So I'm tutoring a little girl, and we've been working for a long time on the Q sound,
Okay.
and she's, when we're doing it with a full scaffold and we're building words, she's doing beautiful. She reads it automatically. Any word that has the QU, she reads automatically. When I do dictation with her, she does a beautiful job.
Hmm.
So yesterday we were working on a story together during independent writing. Well, and she's writing a story about the queen cupcake. And she got to the word queen and she spelled it Kwen. And my teacher instinct came in and I said to her, Logan, can you look at it? And she said, stop it. Let me finish my idea and then I can come back. And so I shut up. We finished the idea. I said, can you go back and reread this now? And can you edit? And she went back to Queen and she spelled it correctly. But what that interaction made me realize is she could not do both things at the same time. She is accurate with Q, but she is not yet automatic. And it was a
Mm.
good reminder that sometimes we don't give kids enough practice. So even though she's accurate, I thought, oh, look at her, she's doing this. She is not yet automatic. And so I think that third kind of why we're not seeing the same uptick is I think that we're under practicing kids. We don't give them enough practice in encoding because encoding is harder. It takes longer for them to get automatic. And they're often, we think they're okay. But really they're just accurate. They're not yet automatic.
Accurate, not automatic. I really love that concept. And I really appreciate that Logan knew right away. Give me a minute here, you know?
I said, if every kid would talk to me that hard, her mom was in the room and her mom looked like, and I said, that's good. Like she's showing us what she needs.
Sure, sure, sure. So it sounds like to me that that precise practice is key. So we need to really be deliberate in planning that instruction. Can you speak to that deliberate instruction?
Yeah, there's a quote that's coming to mind from an esteemed, she was an esteemed mathematician and a consultant. Her name is Lola May, and she said, teachers need to know their stuff. They need to know who they're stuffing, and they need to stuff eloquently. So I love the kind of stuffing eloquently, because I think that really speaks to how do we make our instruction eloquent? Because if we want impact, yes, we need to know our stuff. We need to know our kids, but we also need to have ways that we stuff eloquently. And I think the two bits of research that really help me stuff eloquently that I talk to teachers about is orthographic mapping and Sweller's cognitive load theory. So orthographic mapping is kind of a process that automatizes words. So in orthographic mapping, just to give you an example, I was working in a school a few weeks ago, and I asked the kids to build the word raft. I had some Post-it notes, and I
Hmm.
said, these are all the letters that we need to build the word raft. Let's say the word slowly. So they said the word slowly. They brought down they made the a, st. And then I said, now say the sounds and read the words. So after they built the word with the Post-its, they said each sound, a, st, raft.
Right.
And then we talked about what a raft was, and then they wrote the word raft. And so that's right there. We had the kids orthographically map that word. They knew the letters. They attached them to sounds. They blended them together. They learned the meaning of the word raft, and they wrote that word. And what that process does is research shows us it essentially glues that word into your head and automatizes it. So for some kids, they do that one time. They go through that orthographic mapping one time. That word is now a sight word. For typical kids, they've got to do that 7 or 10 times, and it becomes orthographically, it becomes a sight word. And some kids need to do it 75 times.
Yeah.
But that process, what we're trying to do in orthographic mapping is to automatize words, both in reading and writing. So I think knowing about orthographic mapping and making sure that in your instruction in literacy, kids are constantly orthographically mapping words is vital. And so I'm going to give you some examples soon of like, okay, so if I'm teaching a reading lesson, how am I making sure that kids are having multiple opportunities to orthographically map words, both as readers and as writers? So I think understanding orthographic mapping is key to having elegant instruction.
Sure.
The second thing is, I think, Sweller's cognitive load theory, which I talked briefly about before. But the cognitive load theory talks about the idea that our short-term memory is finite. And so we have to really be deliberate about what we're putting into a lesson and what we're not putting into a lesson. Because if we put too much into a lesson, so if I go back to the raft example, if I ask kids afterwards to dictate and try to spell the best they can, watch out for that raft in the ocean. There's a balloon next to it. I am going to overload their brains, and they're not going to be able to attend to what I want them to learn, which is the ability to encode words with the sounds in them. And so I think the other thing teachers have to pay attention to when they're designing instruction is, am I stuffing too much into this? And kids are not going to be able to hold on to it, because my eventual, what I want to do is all those things in their short-term memory, I want to knock into their long-term memory. And if there's too many things I'm working on, it's not going to happen. So nothing is going to become automatic. So those two things I think are vital in designing instruction.
So orthographic mapping and Sweller's cognitive load theory. Again,
Yes.
thinking about that we only have, there's a little bit of space that we have to be able to move things from short term to long term memory, and to prioritize what we're focusing on. Now, I ask this question to a lot of folks that come to us, and I really think it's around, well, how do we do all of this, right? So, we know the focus is on reading, the science of reading, but we know that encoding falls underneath that when we're thinking about, how to really make sure that students are understanding sounds and letters and so forth.
So I think I'm going to give a few examples, but I think a key word is integration. I almost wish in so many classrooms that we didn't call it reading and writing. We called it literacy instruction, because they're so connected. I'm going to, start with an example. 9 times, I shouldn't even say 9, 10 times out of 10, if I'm doing small group, which is typically called small group reading instruction, there is always a writing component. And I couldn't have learned that better. I did my training in Sounds Right, and every lesson that they do has a writing component. So I'm just going to give you an example. I'm going to go back to that raft example. So this was with kindergarten kids. And we first built the word raft. And the reason why we built that word raft was because those were the letter sounds that they had been working on during their phonics instruction. So we built it with the magnetic letters. The kids read the word, they wrote the word. After that, we read a short decodable passage with those letter sounds in it. And then we ended it with a short dictation, a sentence, where they had to write a sentence with those letter sounds in it. This was during their reading instruction. So that reading instruction there was lots and lots of writing and lots of orthographic mapping. If you kind of go through those 3 parts, those kids probably orthographically mapped at least 20 words. And that lesson was 7 minutes long at tops. So I think it's being very eloquent and very deliberate about sprinkling right encoding across all of that. And the good news is that they're getting encoding work, which is going to help them with writing, but they're also, that work is going to help them as readers. Having to slow down and do that is going to help them as decoding work too. So that's going to kind of help their strengthen their decoding and their encoding simultaneously. Kind of shift I've made another kind is in thinking about avoiding overloaded minds, and kind of Sweller's cognitive load is a more precise kind of interactive writing that I talk about in my book, We Do Writing, where rather than just writing any old sentence together. So for example, if the kids were working on the sounds of I, E, F, D, and G, we might together write the sentence, I fed a pig, because that's giving them practice with phonics. That doesn't have to take place in a separate time. That can be part of your phonics instruction. And so I think that precise kind of interactive writing, rather than just, when I taught first grade, we might write the sentence like, we're having a post office in our class today, and that's wonderful.
Right.
But it wasn't really keeping cognitive load in mind of, let's practice the kinds of work that we're working on during phonics instruction. Yeah, so I think the third thing I'd say, and I think it goes along with this, because I think Kelly Cartwright kept saying this last time in our session, which is so true, is we can't forget cognitive load theory and thinking about orthographic mapping. I think it's essential to have an independent writing time, because in independent writing, a few different things happen. We begin to see, like I saw with Logan, even though I'm doing dictation, even though she's in small group and she can do it when she's doing one thing, she can't do it yet when she's doing two things. So one, it gives me a glimpse into what happens when they try to do more than one thing at a time. And the other thing is, that's the reason why we write. You know, Logan is, she's not writing so that she can do dictated sentences with me. She's writing so that she can make a chapter book about Queen Donut. That's why she, to get her gorgeous, quirky, lovely ideas on the page. So I think with all of this, we can't forget about the importance of having a writing time where kids are trying to do more than one thing at a time.
Yeah, I love it. And you have a lesson toolkit. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So what I've tried to do is because I can see that there's so many things that teachers and school districts need, I have put together a toolkit to try and say that I want teachers' time to be spent on looking at their kids. So my toolkit has lots of templates. It has curated resources to try and make the work of both teachers and schools and districts, simplify it by giving them all the tools that they need at their fingertips. And I have that right on my website.
I do have one last question for you as we close. If you could say just one thing to empower our teachers and school leaders and families, what would it be?
So I'm going to go back to that word integration, that we can teach eloquently. And again, whether you're a teacher or a parent, we can teach eloquently by tucking encoding into already existing literacy structures in our classroom. Because when we do that, we're using that reciprocal nature of reading and writing to let reading improve writing and writing improve reading.
That's awesome advice. Well, Leah, as always, it is such a pleasure to talk with you. I think there's some really great things that teachers can implement right away. Thanks for being with
Awesome.
us.
Oh, thank you so much.